Hello, everyone who is early today. We're gonna get started in probably about 5 minutes or so.
It has. Well, it feels a little bit. Oh shit! Let me make sure I'm on.
How's everyone doing? We're gonna get started in a couple minutes. Hey, Bennett. Thanks for joining today, Bennett. You're muted. How you doing? I don't know if we can hear you. You want to log back in, like log out and log back in? Give everyone some time. We're still a couple minutes early. Hi, Jordana. Hi, Monica. Hi, Cassandra. Mark's on the call too. Hi, Mark.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. Can we hear you, Bennett?
I don't know. Can you?
Yes.
Okay, good.
How are you doing? Wait, talk again.
I muted myself, so that one was.
Oh, okay, cool. Good. Thanks for being here today. We give people like a couple minutes to get settled and things. Monica, your background San Francisco today.
Yeah, I thought we'd give that a whirl since we've already had the moon and the northern lights and the beach. So today we'll go San Fran.
All right, let's give everyone just like one more minute to join and then we can get started. Just a friendly reminder to mute if you are not talking.
Can you guys hear me? Do I sound weird?
No, not at all.
Okay.
All right, we'll give people a little bit more time. All right, we can go ahead and get started and let people hop on as we go. I'm really excited about today's call. We're going to be talking about lost and found. Friendly reminder to mute if you're not talking. Today we have some folks on the call who are experts in this space. We have Gina Knepp here today from Michelson Found Animals. We have Bennett Simonson from Pima Animal Care Center. And I believe Mark Sloat is also on this call. We're going to start today with a presentation from Bennett about some of the things that he's been working on in Tucson with GIS mapping. So take it away, Bennett.
Thanks everyone for coming. Let me get this going. So just some quick background on PAC in case you're not aware. We take in around 18,000 animals a year, 11,000 of which are strays. And we have an RTO rate of about 27% for stray dogs and 18% for stray cats. We are the municipal shelter, so we provide the municipal animal sheltering and animal control functions in Pima County. And just let me know if you can't hear me. My microphone tends to be a little weird, apparently. So for all of our lost and found programs, we have three major components that guide all of them. We do mapping and data analysis that Rory mentioned. We try to create as easy processes and policies as possible for the public to get them reunited with their pets. And we have dedicated staff and volunteers that work on reuniting pets with their owners. With the mapping, there are two different ways we use mapping in our lost and found programs. The first one is this heat mapping that we do. This is all of the annual intakes plotted, all the annual stray intakes. We plot all of our intakes and then can break it down by type like this. So this is where all of our strays came, letting us see where animals are physically coming from really helps us target some of our programs that assist the public and prevent animals from going missing. So our intake diversion programs, things like our pet support call center and other programs designed to help keep pets in the home, we look at data like this and try to prioritize those hot spots in those high intake areas for assistance through other diversion programs.
No, I told her I'd call it after.
For example, the fencing assistance program we have, the whole point of fencing assistance is to prevent animals from going missing because of confinement. So the best way to have a strong impact with that program is to target it in areas where we know there are lots of strays. It helps cut down on the amount of time we're spending on non-impactful programming because we can pretty much predict that a lot of strays are going to come in from those areas. So let's focus on those areas. It also helps us build community partnerships. There's a really strong correlation between intakes and areas that don't have good relationships with the community or with PAC. People from those communities aren't going to know to come to Pima Animal Care search for their pet, and they're not going to probably feel comfortable coming to us. So if we know where those areas are, we can build up relationships with organizations already serving those areas to better help the community. So we may, the area in the south there, that southern hotspot, we have a really close relationship with the council member's office. So we will talk to them directly. We'll piggyback off of their trust they have in the community, and they'll help us get our message out. It just helps us build up that trust quicker and is going to make it more likely that people are willing to come to PAC when they lose their pet, and they're not going to be afraid of getting dinged with a bunch of fines or being judged when they come in because they have that level of trust with us. We also look at a bunch of other data. We're trying to increase how much we collect this data, but we can find out information like what's the rate of return to animals in the community, ones that don't even cross our door. That's really important information for us to know and impacts how we run these programs. If we know that every dog being picked up is within 2 blocks of their home, that's going to change our advice to the public because the best way to get the animal back is to stick in the area they're found. So just trying to gather as much information and have really impactful programming. The second way we use mapping that's really awesome is our found pet map. This map links to Chameleon and is updated live throughout the day. So if you lose your pet, you can look on this map and each one of these plot points is an individual animal. When you click on it, it shows you the intersection where they were picked up, when they were picked up, it gives you a description of them, and further in this box, it tells you how to contact us and gives you the animal ID number. So these are all the animals that got picked up and are physically at our shelter that came in as strays, and the animals that we filed lost and found reports on. So if you're missing your pet, you can more easily search geographically to see if anybody found them. We also just try to make it as easy as possible for the community when reporting lost and found pets. You can submit a lost or found report completely online. You don't have to worry about playing phone tag with somebody in our pet support center. And we just try to make it really simple. People have the option of emailing us pictures and communicating directly with email for everything. We also try to make really friendly, easy handouts. This is one we just started using. If I find a stray and I bring it into the shelter and create a found report, I would get this back. The microchip number and animal ID is written at the top, and then at the bottom there's instructions for the finder of that pet on how best to search for the pet's owner. When the owner and the pet get reunited, the finder will cut off the first half of that form and give it to the pet owner. That way they have instructions on how to change microchip information and make sure that their contact info is all up to date. Then on the back of that form is actually spay-neuter information, so that if the finder keeps the pet, they know how to get him altered, or if it goes back to the owner, they now have information on how to get him altered too. We also just try to make RTOs as low barrier as possible. RTO fees are something that a lot of organizations really hammer on because they think it's going to prevent further strays coming in. But if you're charging exorbitant RTO fees just for the purpose of teaching a lesson, all you're doing is keeping that pet there, and that person is probably going to get another pet. And if the situation is they had a hole in their fence or they aren't sure how to keep a dog from dashing out the door, that problem's just going to happen again, and you're going to end up with more animals. So why don't we help solve that problem and get the pet back, get an animal out of our shelter, and prevent further intakes? We also try to be very flexible with things like identification. A lot of people don't have vet records for their pets or don't have microchip info. So how are they going to prove that this is their pet? We'll take pictures. We'll take pieces of mail with somebody's name on it because they may not have a driver's license and be able to provide identification to process the RTO. We just try to be as flexible as possible because if the person's here trying to get their pet back, we really want that pet to end up back with the owner. We also have some dedicated staff and volunteers who work on RTOs. We have a lost and found specialist who matches the found reports with the lost reports and will actually search things like Nextdoor and online Facebook groups to find owners to reunite them with their pets. We have it as a staff position, but this can definitely be a volunteer position. I know a lot of volunteers who do this in their free time just because they think it's fun to do. So utilize those volunteers and don't be afraid to have them talk to the public. Our APS team is also very big on RTOs. Anytime they pick up an animal in the field, they're supposed to be searching for the owner, calling on a microchip, walking the pet around the neighborhood. We actually even have thermal printers that go in the trucks so that officers can print off a lost and found player right there and either give it to the person who found it or post it around the neighborhood to try to find an owner. So those are a couple of the programs we have going on here that are super beneficial for reuniting pets and their owners. I'm trying to stop sharing my screen. Here we go.
Thank you so much, Bennett. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts that they want to share?
I do. This is Sue Capello from Chicago Animal Care and Control. This is my first webinar with you guys. Thanks for having me. But Bennett, I have a question about where you said the found pet map links to Chameleon. Is that something that's in Chameleon, or is it a program that you have to get Chameleon to hook up for you?
I think the ability to do that is built into Chameleon, but we had to work with our IT department. I can get you in touch with our IT person and he can walk you through it if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
I'll put my email in the chat just so people
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions about for Bennett? Did you get a grant for the printer?
Yeah, it was a innovation challenge. So we were able to get quite a few printers with a couple $1,000s. I think Petco was willing to fund that and get us started on that.
So cool.
I have a question kind of for the group. Bennett, did you guys have to, did you have any issues with the city having volunteers go through those lost and found reports?
No, we've established pretty much from the beginning that we consider volunteers to be essential staff, and that on an individual basis, they should be able to have access to all of our information. So it's just a matter of setting up really clear expectations with the volunteers, very clear job descriptions and what we expect them to be doing and what they're not able to do with that access, and then holding them accountable to it. The county doesn't seem to have a problem with that as long as we're monitoring it and being really clear with our volunteers about what they can and can't do.
Any other questions? Someone asked, do you have a procedure for your lost and found specialist that could be adjusted for volunteers without direct access to Chameleon?
The lost and found surveys that I showed you, the ones that are online, go to a separate spreadsheet that have to be inputted by a specialist. So they're able to file those. Well, I guess those have to go into Chameleon. So the answer is no at the moment, but we're trying to figure out how to have volunteers have access and how they can help like from home. A lot of volunteers do just love to troll the lost and found pages and try to say, oh, there are 5 lost and found pages. This owner posted here and this finder posted over here, and trying to connect them. So that's a great way volunteers can be involved, just within social media, trying to connect people with the found pets.
Awesome. Gina and Mark are both on this call, and I would love to hear, Gina, from you about what you're sort of working on right now, and what you've done at Front Street too. That's sort of innovative and might be useful.
Sure. I will say that at Front Street, our very reliable volunteers are given access to Chameleon and trained on how to add behavior notes, review for lost and found. We didn't have an issue with the city of Sacramento or city attorney's office to grant that at all. Volunteers are covered in workers' comp, just like employees. So I would urge any of you to really push that way, because none of us have enough staff. Rory and I were just on a call talking about RTO and all the techniques that are out there that we could be using that don't cost any money. And again, volunteers are a huge resource for this, and many of them already do it. But I know at Front Street, we gave our customer service team a cell phone, for example, because when you text a pet owner, the likelihood of their responding to a text message from a government agency is in the 90 percentiles. But if they're getting a phone call from and most of us have analog phones and it's some fake number or it says some government entity on it, they're not going to answer their phone so readily. And so it's a really low cost way to give your team a pet detective tool, if you will. We utilize skip tracing service. I think it was, Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, it was like $30 a month. It wasn't very expensive. And literally you're skip tracing like a debt collector does. If you have a dead end on a name or a phone number, it's a very low cost way. And if you can't afford that, you can develop a relationship with your local utility company, whether it's water, sewer, garbage, gas, and identify someone in their organization that's willing to help your team track somebody down. They have great tools and platforms and software systems because they're looking for non-paying customers and just looking for pet owners. And we didn't meet any resistance in doing that. I know that just recently at the city of Sacramento, they moved to a, oh gosh, Bobby, what was the name of the platform?
Salesforce.
Salesforce. So the animal care team has access to the code enforcement software, to the water, to street services, and they, building and permitting, so they can start searching across those platforms for missing people. Because most of the folks that live in our communities cross-pollinate with us, right? If they live in a house, they probably got street sweeping service. So that's another way to think about how do you track people down. We did obtain our own Nextdoor login in Sacramento, and it's completely 100% volunteer managed. They do it from home. They use a snippet tool every single day. They post every stray dog to the appropriate neighborhood from which it was found. And we saw a big uptick in return to owner. In addition to things like increased donations, increased just awareness. People were blown away when they began seeing all the stray dogs that come in every day. We had a lot of positive unintended consequences from using Nextdoor. It's not easy to get your own account. I'll put my email in the chat. I can talk you through that. You may be in a jurisdiction that allows you your own access, but if it doesn't, you have a ton of employees and a ton of volunteers in your community that can be doing the same thing. So there's always another way to skin a cucumber, I like to say. Bobby, help me out. What am I missing?
No, you're crushing it. This is Bennett. I'm just incredibly impressed by all the things that you're doing at PAC as well. I know Jennifer Magana, the pet reunification coordinator at Front Street, really looked at your model and focused a lot of what we have been doing based off of what you were doing. So that's really exciting. The other thing is texting. We have our own texting program, which I'll share some links in the chat as well. But I think that the one thing that we can all agree on, regardless of what sort of technique or program or technology we're looking at, it's never or, it's always and, right? I mean, you have such a robust system there, Bennett, because you have a list of systems that you go through. And so we're always looking for new techniques and technology to be able to support this, but we also highly focus on not adding additional layers. We always try to go where people already are and tools they already know how to use. I mean, things as simple as Craigslist or the Facebook Lost and Found pages. I mean, you nailed it when you said that you have volunteers that are really doing that checks and balances for you. Nextdoor was incredibly huge for us. And for the people that are concerned about giving chameleon access to volunteers, if you do have the ability to open up the Nextdoor platform. So, I know the concerns are always that most people can only post within their neighborhood. So when we speak of Nextdoor, we actually went directly to Nextdoor and they gave us an administrative account for every neighborhood within the city of Sacramento. And so what our volunteers would do is they would actually just go to our Lost and Found page and look at the 2 major cross streets, and then they would identify the Nextdoor community based off of that. And they would literally just copy the photo from the website with the description and dump it into a Nextdoor template that we had created. So that was really easy. It's not invasive in our shelter software. But going back to the concept of allowing volunteers into our shelter software, it all just comes back to trust. I mean, the foundation of our success at Front Street was empowering volunteers. I mean, we can't do it on our own, and most people are good. Frankly, a lot of them are a lot smarter than we are. That's why they're either retired early or have weekends off. So just trust, feel empowered, let them do good work, and I guarantee you'll see great results from that.
Yeah, and the letting volunteers, especially the whole Nextdoor project, it's been going for 2 years now and nothing bad happened and nobody died. And those are kind of like the 2 criteria I use to determine if something's successful or not. And I don't know if everybody understands what the texting program is, but essentially someone who either finds a pet or loses a pet texts a particular number with a keyword. And if they are the loster, I hate to call them losers, if they're the loster, they start to get a step-by-step. These are the things you need to do as a pet owner. These are the places that you need to look. This is what, here's a video on how to find a missing indoor cat. I think Bridget's on the call. You helped us review that video. And it's been used all over the country with huge success. And people are free to plagiarize. And the texting program costs about $1,000 a year, depending upon how large your city is. Sacramento is 500,000 people. I think it was $1,200 a year. But it's completely, once you set it up and you do it in a day, you're done. You don't have to dedicate staff to it. And it's all-encompassing one place for pet owners and pet finders to have a resource for help. And it was met with great success. I'm working on Chicago. Hinsdale Humane is installing right now. New York did. I'm working with some other shelters in California. it's easy peasy, and it's, you know, once it's up and you can just let it go. Texting has a whole bunch of other opportunities, like communicating with volunteers, communicating with fosters. It's cheap, it's easy, and it works.
I think texting is, we are working on getting texting, but it's also an incredibly important part of working with pet owners in poverty. People who have minute by minute phones are going to be reluctant to answer a phone call because they don't want to waste their minutes. Texting uses up less minutes, and a lot of phones, even if somebody's out of call minutes, they can still receive text messages.
Right.
So when you run into those, this phone's no longer in service, texting is a good way around that.
Or the voicemail box has not been set up, or the voicemail box is full, a text message will still go through. What else did we do, Rory? We gave our customer service team their own private Facebook page, because a lot of staff will use their own personal Facebooks to hunt people down and try and find missing owners. And we created one they use specifically for that purpose. And with it, we installed what's it called, Bobby? Mighty app, so that they can send text messages and scripts and big forms to people via text right off of their desktop. Again, a really low cost way to increase communication with people.
Yeah, Mighty Text is great. So what that allows people to do is all of our customer service reps that are responsible for RTO download this application, and it is a single phone number, which is their cell phone that we've assigned to them, and they all receive group communication through there. So we have templates based off of if your pet was brought in for a conversation. We have if you lost your pet. We even have texting for when people need to pick up from medical appointments, and that way everybody knows what conversation's happening with every client. And that way, even if someone does have a day off, someone can jump right back in and help with that service. So that was really helpful for us as well.
And if you're concerned about, you know, public records requests, everything that we do on the texting platform and on it's cataloged, so it can be produced. We've never had anybody ask for it, but it's available.
Yeah, and we've also, in the last meeting that we had with Rory, we've come up with new branding to empower staff, and we want to call them pet detectives, right? Is that the goal?
That's right.
I love it. Anyone who wants to hop in and share, I know we also have Mark on the call, so I'd love to hear about what's going on in Austin, because Mark has really done some amazing things in Austin. And Faith too, please chime in. Mark, you want to share some of the metrics that you've been finding that are just sort of...
Yeah, so a lot of you are already on to like Nextdoor. I'm looking behind me because I have 3 screens up. On Nextdoor, on our lost found reports, the data that I kind of shared with some people a month ago, that was our #2 way of pets getting back home next to microchips. It was like 27% out of 100 respondents. So we definitely want to expand on our use of Nextdoor. Right before COVID started, Faith had asked me today if I would share a little bit of a program I was going to start, and it was a program I named Targeted Intake Reduction. I have a PowerPoint I can briefly bring up. I'm not going to go through every slide with you all because you can figure it out, but if I get the screen share up. Help. Where'd it go?
And I'm sharing in the chat a couple of presentations from our conference. Gina did a great presentation about increasing RTO in your organization, and Bobby and Gina presented on using technology. So check those out, they're in the chat.
Sorry about this. I had it already and I don't know where it went.
That's all right. Anyone else have anything they want to share or things they
I have a question for Bennett. This is Alex with KC Pet Project. For the found pet map that you guys do you know if you ever cross-reference that map with your lost pet reports?
The lost pet reports do show up on there, but that is one thing our lost and found specialist does, is look at the found pet reports or the stray intakes and try to match them with the lost reports.
Okay, I just didn't know if you guys were like utilizing, so here we're working on creating a spreadsheet to move into Google Maps for our lost pet reports that we receive from the public, and then utilizing a found pet map and checking to see if we have anybody close. So I just didn't know if anybody else was doing that right now, if they found that worthwhile.
Is anyone else doing that?
Can you repeat the question, Rory?
I'm going to ask Alex to repeat the question.
Sorry, so basically where you are geolocating pinpoints of where animals have been found, and then on that same map, geolocating where owners have reported their pets missing, and then seeing if any of those two dots link up to find the owner. Does that make sense?
It does. So one of the things that is currently available through Pet Harbor, if anybody uses Chameleon, is they have a found animal report and a lost animal report. And Pet Harbor claims that those two look at each other and try to pinpoint some of that geographic data and some of the other descriptors. So we're currently trying to get a hold of somebody at Pet Harbor to tell us how that works and if it works. So if anybody out there is using that, I'd love to know if it's actually working. Because that's been one of our downfalls, is we've always had to rely on people to try to match up these lost animals and found animals. And really what we need is a technological breakthrough to be able to look at some of that to remove it. But that's what Pet Harbor claims this thing they have will do. Anybody else have anything out there? I'm going to go ahead and jump in. I found my thing. I closed the 6 million windows I had open so I could find what I wanted. But so right before COVID, literally a week before COVID shut everything down, I presented this to my staff and to leadership, and this, we were going to do what I was going to call targeted intake reduction. And we look at, again, like the heat maps that had been talked about earlier. We use our high intake areas. We're going to go to our high intake and lowest return to owner rate area. This is an area we've flooded with resources in the past. We have a spay neuter clinic there. I had a targeted adoption animals from that area. We tried to adopt back into the area in a mobile unit, and nothing has really worked. So what we were going to do is we were going to go into this area and we're going to flood it with resources of people. And the first thing we were going to do was try to talk to people that lived in the area. And the overall goal was to reduce the intake by 20% in 3 months. I'm not going to do anything small. I want to do everything big and get big results really quickly. And then we could, if it worked, we could, repeat it throughout the city. Just go zip code to zip code. And so when I say zip code, I'm not talking the entire zip code. I'm talking about a very small part. I'm zipping through some of these screens that don't really mean anything to you guys. Unfortunately, I can't see them until I get there. But each work group that's under me had a different assignment and different things. And so I know you're not used to our area, but this is a little bit of the demographics of the area. 1,420 pets came in from that area last year. It gives you a breakdown of what they are. The entire zip code has 11,000 homes. We're just targeting 3,000 of them in a very small area. And so again, this is to explain to the staff why we're doing it. This gives you an actual idea of how many animals that we would have an effect on in just that one little 3,000 household area. And when you look at the entire zip code, that's this area right here. And the smaller area is actually over in this kind of Google Earth type image. It's only, like I said, 3,000 homes out of this giant zip code. And unfortunately with COVID, it shut all this down. But a lot of what we talked about earlier on the national call is, we go into these areas and we think we know what the area needs. And again, we've flooded this area in the past with resources that we thought they needed. So this time we were going to go in. Our first thing going in was going to have people on the ground just talking to the people that live there and see what they really need, and can we supply that. And also just help them understand, what our struggles are in the area, and that we don't want their pets coming to the shelter. I see Cassandra's got help over there. But the biggest thing we have to do here in Austin, and we learned this the hard way a couple of years ago, is we have to make sure we know what the community wants and what the community needs. Sometimes those don't match what they want and what they need. And so we have to be very careful in how we present what we think they need after listening to what they want, and then helping them understand how we can work together. But again, when we are able to do this, I fully expect to see a huge reduction in intake. We're on track right now because of COVID. We're probably going to intake 10,000 animals this year. Last year we took almost 18,000. So we've already gotten out of May. That was our busiest month every year. But our RTO rate right now in Austin, I just checked it for last month, between shelter and the field was 56%. So we're really doing well in getting animals out, but it's because we have the people's attention right now. So the sooner we can get some of this political and civil stuff behind us and get past this COVID, I think we're in a good position now to really help the public, help us, help them.
Thanks, Mark. It's really interesting. What are others doing or struggling with, or anyone who wants to hop in, just hop on,
Hey, I was also going to mention, if you are in a unit that you can't afford to buy your staff cell phones to do texting, you can text, you can do the type to text from an email, and you just have to know the carrier. You can search the phone carrier, and each carrier has a different way to text. All our dispatchers are required to do that now. They are not allowed to just leave a voicemail. They have to leave a voicemail if possible, and a text, because we all know, as Bennett said, people respond to text. We're getting tons of animals homes because of text, where in the past we left them a voicemail. So that's an option. You can Google the carrier of the phone, just type in the number, and then you can do a type to text.
Wow, that's really cool. Anyone have any questions? Thoughts?
I have a question for Mark. How, data tracking is so important. How is your team keeping track, or are they, of what was the successful thing? Was it the text? Was it the, whatever the effort was? Because I think, we all know Nextdoor is great, but I'd like to hear from folks on how you're tracking it.
So I'm a big data nut. So everything we do, we track. If we start a new program, we have a start date, and we modify, we make note of what the change is. So because all the officers have computers in their trucks, everything they do is obviously tracked. And then in the PRC, the Pet Resource Center, anytime they're doing something, that's also documented on Chameleon. And then we do keep some spreadsheets and whatnot, and we do a lot of data mining just with the data that we have. It's even to the point where, like right now, because we have this, Austin kind of did a soft open. We're not technically open to the public 100%. So in the Pet Resource Center, I only am allowed 10 animals a day to come in by the director, because we have a shortage of staff. So every time somebody walks up to our PRC with a healthy stray or owner surrender that hasn't followed the directions that's been given to the public, we tally that. And it's just as simple as a tally on the tally sheet. And then it's tallied whether it's an owner surrender or a stray. And then we'll compile that data into a report so that we can show how it's impacting our staff. But I am a big fan of, if you're doing some kind of work, you need to be documenting it. Because if it doesn't work, stop doing it. And if it does work, let's tell everybody else about it so I can do it.
Right, I totally agree. You're doing a great job with your RTO. I'm very interested to see you're at 57% for dogs. What is it going to be, a year from now with all additional concerted effort? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mark, the ultimate goal of the program, once obviously we're able to completely reopen, is that you'll look at zip codes. Like right now we're looking at the one that we're looking at and the area that we're looking at, but our goal is to start, prioritizing 1, 2, 3, 4, and really getting in there and establishing relationships with those communities, right?
Right. So we had one zip code, I don't remember the zip code, but it's to the east of us, and it used to be our highest intake zip code. And once we got in there and started talking to the people and realized some of the things they were they were wanting weren't things that we could, some of the things we couldn't give, and other things we could give it to them, but in a better service model. That zip code it's not even on our radar anymore for intake, especially a very small part of it. For those in Austin, it's called Colony Loop. And half a Colony Loop, it's not actually a loop, it's divided in half, but the east side of it, we're almost never there anymore. But that took a concerted effort. Christina Snow, who's now in Pima County, was one of the officers that helped us, but we knocked on 413 doors over 2 weekends and talked to people. And it takes a huge commitment of staff and a willingness to go out there and talk to people. And we had such incredible results from that. Again, we very seldom get called, and they know now that if they do see a dog truck in the area, they can run out to that dog truck and ask to see the dog on board, see if they know whose dog it is, and we're happy to show it to them. And quite often, they know whose dog it is because they've lived. It's an area where people have lived there for generations, so it's a very stable neighborhood, and there was no reason for it to ever be a high intake area, and now it's not. So,
Hey, Mark,
you do get
That
results.
kind of goes
Yes.
to Teresa's comment too, where she's asking about reunification programs being done in the field without bringing animals to the shelter. Once you start to get to know your community, they have that comfort level of just walking up to your truck and saying, what's on there? I might know that animal. You start to really be able to do a lot of that, or you start to just recognize the same animals that you already know because it's the same officers in the same area.
Yeah, our officers are in the same place for 6 months at a time, and I keep threatening them with changing it to permanent placement, but it certainly shows efficacy.
Hey, Mark, could you go into a little more detail on, I was very interested when you said we went into the neighborhoods and asked them what they needed or wanted, even some things that we weren't able to offer. Could you share in a little more detail on what some of those things were?
Yeah, so some of the things that they wanted was ongoing. They want a vet clinic in the neighborhood, for one thing. That's not something I can do. It's an underserved area. There's not any grocery stores nearby. The closest arguably large grocery store is several miles away, and I think there's a corner store. So while I can't provide veterinary care, we do have a spay-neuter clinic through Emancipet that is there. But what they were complaining about was that the people from the neighborhood weren't able to use it because people from outside the neighborhood were getting there at 4:30 in the morning to get in line. So that is still something we're working on with Emancipet, trying to schedule times in there. And we're going to do some scheduling where it's not known to the public. It's just for that neighborhood to come in. We do national night out events there. And the first year I was there, I invited myself, and it didn't go over real well. And I took a bunch of stuff that they didn't need. They didn't need collars and leashes. They need stuff like flea medication. They need information on mange, flea dermatitis, those kind of things that separate animals from people. And also they needed me to not assume that I knew more than they did. It wasn't ready access to services.
Yeah, that was such a big part of our call this morning,
Right.
Not assuming we know. And I would be very interested. I mean, even if you could put those thoughts on paper, I think just having a place to start would be so great, and just getting some of that feedback, since you have such a proven model, right? You went in, you listened, you adapted, you increased your RTO. So I would love to see some of that on paper so we can measure that compared to other cities.
All right.
Well, it seems like using that Nextdoor account would really help find out what those communities actually need, because they're posting needs most of the time on Nextdoor. And if the city can see that, then they can more readily access that information.
And that's a good area for other human service agencies that are serving the community to get their input, because there are going to be communities that Nextdoor is not an accurate representation of the people who actually live in that community. So working with human service agencies that already have that trust and are already serving the community is a quick way to get in and get access to those people through a venue that they're willing to talk to.
Can you give some examples, Bennett, of services that you all have worked with?
A big one is the Ward 5 office here in Tucson. It's in the southwestern part of town, tends to have higher levels of poverty and less access to resources, but they have a great community relationship with their council member who's been there for decades. So working with them, some stuff we just take them supplies and let them hand it out. Some, they've connected me with neighborhood organizations that I can go to the neighborhood meetings, places like the food bank or faith, like churches and mosques and things like that, that people are already serving, just trying to go to places that already have that trust built up, and are already providing human services. We don't need to remake the wheel to hand out pet services if people are already being served in an effective manner.
I was going to mention, to piggyback on what Bennett said, part of our outreach into this particular neighborhood was their neighborhood association. It's run by a group of very dedicated, lifelong residents that really have their pulse on what's going on in their neighborhood. And they're the ones that kind of actually they kind of told April Moore and I the what for and how to. They educated us real quick, and we took it humbly. And that's what made us change. But they then were able to connect us with the church leaders. The Meals on Wheels and more that go into those neighborhoods can help. And honestly, I mean, if you want to know what's going on in the neighborhood, talk to your FedEx driver, UPS driver, and your mailman. You know, they're the people that are in those neighborhoods every day, and they build relationships with people, and they know everybody in the neighborhood who knows who should be there.
And I think you have to caution, especially when you're using Nextdoor and neighborhood associations. Areas that are being heavily gentrified, those Nextdoor neighborhood associations may be dominated by people gentrifying the neighborhood, not people who've lived there for a long time. So just be cautious to keep an eye on the demographics of the neighborhood and the demographics of who you're speaking with, and make sure you're not having selection bias by speaking to the wrong people.
No, and I agree with Bennett. That's heavily happening right here in Austin, right where the shelter is. It's incredibly, the gentrification is amazing. But yet you go across the next highway, and that's where we're at with this other group. But you do have to be aware of that. And the other thing I was going to mention on Nextdoor, I had a conversation with Nextdoor. They have an application on Nextdoor that if you file a law enforcement type thing, like let's say you want to report somebody was, breaking into your car at night, and you just want to tell your neighbors about it, before you hit enter, or before it sends it, it asks you if you want to report it to law enforcement, and it will automatically send that concern to law enforcement. So when I talked to Nextdoor, I said, man, this would be great for animals, because if people lose an animal, it could say, do you want to report this to your local animal control authority? And the lady said, well, yeah, we have that technology, but that's probably a year away before we were willing to do it. She said they're a small company. They weren't really willing. So maybe if all of us nationally start bugging Nextdoor to have that option that's already there, the technology's already there, so when somebody posts their pet got lost, or there was a found pet, it could automatically report to us. That'd be like a huge game changer. And it because even on my Nextdoor, as soon as somebody posts a lost pet, I'm tagged in it. People are private messaging me, and we get dogs home. But I also have like 65, 70 pets that are listed. They have their photos on the site in case they get loose. So if you're into Nextdoor, if you know anybody there at the company, let me know who I can call. I need to get around this person who's my roadblock. I think it would be hugely helpful.
Is anybody else exhausted from this week? This week kicked my butt. How are you feeling, Rory?
Feeling pretty good. I woke up today and thought it was Thursday, and then realized it was Friday and was pleased.
Good. Well, I just wanted to also just check in with everyone and acknowledge it is late on a Friday, and you're all still here with us talking about how to provide better service to our community. And through everything that's going on, I'm just very appreciative of this pack that we have. So thank you all.
It must have warmed up, Bobby. I see you're not wearing a hood anymore, and Rory actually looks awake. So
I know. I was like,
both of my calls this morning, Bobby's in a sweatshirt and a hoodie.
right.
Like I'm dying in my
I'm
house.
dying.
Already. Like what the heck?
That's because my wife had conference calls, and I get selected to be in the backyard. So
Yeah, but it must be cool enough to wear a hoodie in your backyard. If I walk out of my backyard, I need to be in a bathing suit. It's hot.
We got lucky today.
about 109 here today in sunny Tucson, so it's lovely. My skin is parched. I also just really, I'm so excited that that we're having these conversations about lost and found pets. I think something for me that has just been such this question mark is just, you know, you get to know these animals, and I'm always just like, someone must have loved you, you know, you belonged somewhere. And I really hope that it's something that we can find more solutions for by talking to each other. So,
Hey, one other thing, or you just reminded me of this. I am not calling them stray dogs anymore. I'm never ever uttering those words. I'm going to call them loose pets, lost pets, because we have such an issue with people thinking stray dogs are unowned dogs or uncared for dogs. And I think nationally we need to quit calling them strays. I mean, obviously you can't be a stray if you didn't have somewhere to stray from, but they're not pariah dogs. They're not street dogs in Austin anyway. These are owned animals that are being plucked out of their yards. We know from the data here in Austin that most people are pulling them less than 300 feet from their home. Obviously way less than 1,000 feet from their home. So we need to help people understand that they're taking their neighbors' pets and bringing them to a place where they may not ever get home from.
Yeah,
Well,
Monica, about that too. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. The animals, if we have the animal, it's not lost anymore. It's the person that's lost. And now we need to find the person. But I'm so with you, Mark. We need to stop using the word stray. It has a negative connotation.
No, now we have to find the loster.
That's
That's
right.
my
the
word now. That's
loster.
it. I'm in love with that word. You've got me all excited about this word. I'm adding it to
I will-
Wikipedia and everything.
I will get the point of contact at Nextdoor and get it to Rory so that he can share it with this group afterwards. You can do that, right, Rory?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, terrific.
A couple of years ago, I threatened to take our intake animals out and wear a big sandwich board and walk the dog around the neighborhood. Says I lost my human. Leanne challenged me to do it. I never did it, but maybe one of these days.
It's a great idea.
I do have a question about, you know, I know that we all know the benefits of microchips, but is anyone doing anything really innovative with like getting a lot more tags out in the community to people to get on collars so we can get immediate identification on pets in the community?
So I do that. If people can put in a request via email or Nextdoor, I posted on a couple Nextdoor sources a couple years ago, said, if you need tags, please respond to this message. We mailed out, I think it was 40 some tags to 2 different neighborhoods. Everywhere where we do a microchip event, we also do free tags. So we do both. We never do just microchips. If we're ever going to do just one and not the other, it's going to be tagging. And then my officers, all of them, for the most part, do microchips in the field. And they will also take down names and addresses and whatever people want in a tag. They'll come back to the shelter, make the tag, and then the next day deliver it.
I know the Pets for Life program in Wisconsin was using luggage tags, like little plastic tags you just write on stock paper, and they don't hold up forever, but they hold up enough that they work, and especially when you have repeated contact with that person. And it's especially helpful for people who may have to move often or whose phone numbers may not stay valid for very long, because those can be switched out much easier than a metal tag.
Yeah, and at Sacramento, we would actually just loan out our tag making machine. So we were getting the tags for about 30 cents a piece. And it's a really engaging way for people that are having community events to offer something to their community. So I believe it was Pet Hub shared some data with us too, that if we are not physically putting the tags on the animals, there's like a very low % chance that they'll actually end up on the pet. So our goal was always to try to be in a place where someone will be with their pet to actually put the tag on. But yeah, I mean, we like anytime, like if we have our Hispanic chamber, anytime they're having an event, even if we couldn't get a volunteer to come, we would say, hey, would you guys like to borrow our tag machine? And so now almost every weekend, the shelter has 3 tag machines and almost one is always rented out to a community member.
That is a great idea.
That's a good idea. I have 5. I think I could probably skip one for a weekend.
And we actually at the city of Sacramento have a couple of volunteers that are just over the top Cocoa for Cocoa Puffs. And they will take names and numbers in the field, come to the shelter, they print out all the tags, and then they deliver them to people. It's a great way to meet people where they are. And the volunteers seem to love it, especially when it's in their neighborhoods.
Yep.
Love that.
And if someone has a chance to watch one of the classes, it talks about the SMART team that was created in Sacramento, which is the Sacramento Missing Animal Response Team. And we would actually have groups of volunteers that would go to events where we would have large volumes of dogs coming. And they would actually not only be giving away free tags, they'd be scanning those pets for chips to make sure that that owner had the chip number, and they would be giving them the registry information to found. So that way that chip would at least be registered somewhere for free. So we have, I think Gina might have some SOPs on the whole program that we could share.
I do actually, and it's awesome because it doesn't cost you anything. We did buy them their own scanner, and sometimes they'd even go out with a Wi-Fi and a laptop and help people update their registration. I did a national survey on RTO several months ago, and one thing we did find was that the shelters that register the chip at time of implant for the owner or adopter have the highest RTO rates. So it's something to think about. I know there's controversy, you know, saying that chips are worthless, but Mark, your data doesn't show that to be true.
No, my data shows it's not true. And also, as I think Bobby mentioned before, it's not one or the other. It's how about this also? You know, again, tags work, a phone number on a collar works, and microchips work. Tags fall off, microchips move. But, you know, we're going to do everything we can to try to get these animals back home. And our data shows that people are willing to put an unknown dog in their car and drive to a vet clinic pre-COVID and have it scanned, or go to a PetSmart or Petco. So I know people are driven to do it, and it's nationally known that pets have microchips.
People like to be superheroes, and we should let them. You know, something we didn't talk about today at all was Finding Rover. It's free, it works, but it only works if all of our staff can speak to it and encourage people to register their pets and to absolutely report if their pets are missing. But again, it's, yes, it's not one thing, it's and.
On the topic of microchips, in terms of intake for groups who microchip all of their animals upon intake, are you seeing that help in cases of those animals ending up back? Or for organizations who do not microchip at intake, are you seeing owners being willing to purchase the microchip from you to be implanted before the animal goes home?
Nobody else talking. We implant now at time or before it goes home. We didn't used to, but ours are always free. It's a lot cheaper to give away a microchip than to house the dog. And then also because we're doing so much microchipping, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now, you know, our dog RTO rate is constantly, you know, minimum of 24-25%. And in the field, obviously, if my officers can't catch a dog, they just run it home. But if they do and there's microchip, it's 100% going back home, as long as we can find whose microchip it is.
Yeah, and for agencies that are struggling with sort of the finances behind buying large volumes of chips, so the easiest way for us to really quantify that, so even to the public, we would say at Front Street that we would sell found animals chips for $5, which is essentially our cost, but most of the time we would give them away for free. And so anytime that we would implant a chip within our facility, if we saw that dog come back to our shelter, we can all quantify sort of the cost of care based off of our length of stay. So every animal that doesn't come in, let's say you're saving $300 or $400, and you know a box of chips is costing you $300 or $400 to chip 100 or 50 animals. It's very easy to quantify the value. So that's sort of the way that we look at it.
Thank you. And Bobby, you touched on it briefly, but are we seeing that a lot of us as organizations are finding efficient ways to show owners how to update their information? So for our organization, we're seeing semi-significant amount of animals coming in with microchips, and I'm wondering if anybody else is experiencing the same, where only about half of them are actually usable information, and how we reach out to the community to let them know and give them resources to update the microchips, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great question.
It is a good question, Bobby. That's one of the things that the SMART team in Sacramento was doing, is regardless of what kind of a chip the animal may have in it, and there are a lot of hidden costs depending upon the chip company, and not to denigrate any of them, but if you have to pay to update your registration, a lot of people won't do it. and I don't sell microchips, but I do work for Michelson. Ours is the only chip where there is no hidden cost. And we also encourage people with a different chip to still register with found animals so that they're in the registry. It's free and they can do it and change it anytime they want.
Yeah, we give out the found animals. That's on everybody. Everybody gets that form with a couple different registries. The other thing I was going to say is, as mentioned before, addresses change, phone numbers change, but one thing that we have found statistically that doesn't change is email addresses. A lot of people keep the same email forever. So when we get chip information, one of those things we want that we have to have on that form, it's a must-have, is an email. And it doesn't matter, you know, it's amazing. It doesn't matter the demographic. It seems like they've had the same email, and that's what a lot of studies are showing. So it's another way to get a hold of people. If you can't get them through the phone or an address, at least you have an email.
It's a really good point, Mark. And that's another way that Michelson kind of incentivizes their product, the shelters, with the higher rate of capturing email, the cheaper your chips are. So
we also, I'm in New Jersey, an animal control officer, and what we have been doing lately is we have our microchips in the field. So when we do find a dog and it is not microchipped, when we go to return that dog to the owner, we offer to microchip it for them. And then we use Pet Point. So we will intake the animal as a clinic and enter the information into our system, and that automatically attaches that owner to the dog. So for any time in the future, that dog is always registered at that point, from that point forward. We are also trying to do like a monthly clinic where people can come in and microchip their pets. We're also investing in the tag machine like Mark has, so that we can go out there and help the people keep their pets identifiable, so that they can be returned to the owner much quickly. But we do find that the Pet Point is a great tool for entering that data in, and we all have laptops in our vehicles as well, so we just do it right there in the system as soon as we're there, so that it gets registered. We do find that there's a lot of, you know, if you give them a paper and tell them, here, register this animal, that hardly ever gets done, as we all know. So by doing it for them, we know from now on that dog is always going to be registered, and the information is current. Speaking of email addresses, we're in the process of converting our dog master list system to another program. And we're also going to make sure that we have a field in there for email addresses and a field in there for the microchip numbers. So when we have a dog master list, we can look it up by the license number on the tag, or we can look it up by a microchip if the collar falls off and they don't have a tag anymore. So we always have multiple reference points for finding the owners of these animals.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. And thanks everyone for joining this call today. I've put a link to a sign-in form in the chat. If you all could sign in, that will give me your email addresses so that I can send out the resources that were shared on this call. We have these every week. We're changing to having this sort of summit style this week. So if there's topics that you want to see us talking about, or speakers that you want us to bring in, feel free to email inquiries@americanpetsalive.org. And I'm so thankful to Bennett and to Mark and Gina and Bobby, who left already, but thanks everyone for being here, and grab that link to the form, and I will see you all soon.